Hey, welcome back to Beyond the Scripts. I'm your host, Will Tuft with Pioneer RX and Red Sail Technologies. So today, as per usual, I have a great guest joining us, this time from the far, far regions of the West Coast. Welcome, Josuah Tilus.
Hey, Will, thanks so much for having me on today. Honestly, it's an honor. I've been listening to the podcast for a while, so it's a cool experience to be on the other side.
You know, whenever I talk to people, like friends of mine outside of pharmacy, and they ask about my podcast, I always kind of explain to them that it's really cool because I get to just talk to like the stars of independent pharmacy. And if there were trading cards for the profession, you know, I'm talking to the Michael Jordans, I'm talking to, you know, the biggest names in the industry. I feel like if we were to pick out like a Rookie of the Year card, your name would be at the top, if not the top, for that Rookie of the Year position. So I met you back in June or July, back at the Apex event in San Antonio.
Yeah, no, I remember that, and getting connect, and hey, I love Pioneer, and I'm like, I remember hearing your voice from all the Pioneer X videos. The university of like, that's the guy.
For sure. So in the past year, you've been down in Florida, over in Texas, now over way up on the West Coast. Tell me a little bit about your journey. Actually, let me throw out a couple dates here because I put together a pretty impressive short timeline. So May 24, graduate from the Gregory School of Pharmacy down in Palm Beach, Atlantic University.
Go Celtics.
July 24, passed your board exams in Washington. Also bought a house up in Washington. Big change. September 24, joined the Chinook family, Chinook Pharmacy and Variety store. November 24, live on Pioneer, and now in March 25, live on the podcast. So, man, what a year.
What I love about Connect so far is just seeing everybody around that I know are top performers in independent community pharmacy.
Not a better place to be, a lot of forward-thinking people.
It was pretty much game-changing for care planning and medicine.
Allowed our business to grow in so many ways, it's unimaginable.
You get to interface with other pharmacy owners that have the same ambitions and desires that you have for pushing the future of pharmacy.
If you're not here, you're missing out.
Register today for Connect 2025 in Grapevine, Texas.
It has been such a whirlwind of, from new grad to everything kind of having to happen in a very specific sequence of events. Because I know the old owners, the ones that I bought from, really wanted to sell, and if they could sell to a P4, they would. And so they're really ready to get out there, and so we had to, so I'm like, I have to pass the boards on the first time, June and July, so between MPJ and Apex, and then apparently you can't leverage a house unless you've had it for a year, or you can't leverage a business to a house unless you've had it for a year, unless you've had it for tax return purposes. So we had to buy that had to buy that, but I had to leverage a pharmacist's salary to buy the house. So everything kind of had to happen in this very sequential timeline in order for it to work. And honestly, praise God that we're excited that happened. And there was a little pressure in there, and I'm like, well, okay, we have to, you have to kind of grind because you have to succeed on this one. But
that's
honestly,
right.
God has really provided in a way to really kind of align it all. House ownership, pharmacy ownership, both two very different beasts. I just remember feeling and some people ask okay, when do you feel like you become the owner? It was honestly on the day I bought, I felt like if an elephant was lying on the floor and I was lying next to it and the elephant was just slowly rolling over me, is what felt like ownership. It's this weight of, wow, it's not only like myself, as a student, but it's the lives around me that depend, like my employees depend on really the decisions that I make and the business that makes. And then honestly, the patients also then rely on you too. And so it's an honor, but it's honestly like, the onus of responsibility of feeling like, okay, yeah, this is awesome. Like, this is what I always wanted. I always wanted to be an owner, and it's cool to actually experience that. And then, yeah, pioneer conversion, and I'll say change in a small town is never appreciated in the beginning. But I will say, like, the nimbleness of pioneer, and I mean, and this is a pioneer podcast, so hopefully everybody knows how awesome this program is. But if you're just checking in, pioneer is awesome.
Yep.
And
yeah, we're a little bit biased.
Yes, but really really, this town got to experience two system changes. The hospital just changed to Epic, and we changed to Pioneer. So kind of their worlds was kind of thrown out of whack. But it allowed us to juxtapose two very efficient systems. And really, Pioneer kind of highlighted how nimble and flexible it was. I'm a techie. I'm 25, so I really like technology, and I spend a lot of time tinkering with the PMS. And we were able to get back up to pretty much normal speed in about 2 months after conversion, just because every day I was going back, okay, like, what did we learn from today? How can we tweak our processes to become more efficient? And now we're about 30 to 40% faster than what we were before the system conversion, thanks to the program. I will say
nice.
There were long days. Those were 16-hour days easily for a couple months, but honestly, it's a labor of love. I love this stuff, so every moment was like, okay, this is a grind. But since I've been on Pioneer as an intern in the past, I was like, hey guys, I get it. It's hard because your brain has thought this honestly inefficient way with this other program that I won't mention. And now you kind of have to think in Pioneer way, and it can just do so much. It's the Cadillac, so you have to think like you're driving a Cadillac and no longer like a Honda Civic. No diss on the Civics though. They're awesome.
So let's back up on that timeline. I want to talk a little bit about your journey through your education process, because when I met you, I guess you were just out of school.
Yes.
And we connected on LinkedIn. We became Facebook friends, and it's been neat seeing your journey. And I remember early on seeing you post so many photos with so many industry leaders, and I saw you out with SWAT. I was really impressed with just how engaged you were in the pharmacy community during school and right after school. And so when I started to dive in a little bit, I found a great article about you on the university webpage. And they kind of mentioned some of the accolades during your collegiate career, including the Presidential Scholarship from NCPA, the Pfizer Scholarship through Kappa Psi, the Terry Grubb Student Leadership Award. What else? The Living Faith Scholarship from Gregory School of Pharmacy twice. Is it Rochai Academic Society?
Rochai, yes.
Rochai, yeah. And and another award from Kappa Psi. So you were incredibly engaged at school and within the pharmacy profession. So it really seems like, that journey, it must be tough on its own just academically, but then you really seem to get a lot of mileage out of the connections and the experience. So tell me a little bit about your collegiate experience.
Yeah, no, it's honestly, it's such a whirlwind of 4 years. But I'm considered, and in our program, we have we're connected to an undergrad. And so we have kind of 3 tracks. The fast track, which is you just two years of prereqs, you go straight into pharmacy. You can do the bachelor's degree, so you can do 4 years and then into pharmacy. Or you consider the maximalist, which is you can do your undergrad in 3 years, you still get a bachelor's, and then you can go into pharmacy. And I kind of took that maximalist mindset into pharmacy, where I wanted as much as I could out of these 4 years as I possibly could. And so between like getting a PharmD and an MBA, yeah, being probably too involved in a lot of things, I climbed the NCPA track, was a chapter president my second year, just through an unfortunate circumstance. It was a board of P3s when I was a P1, and they asked me like, hey, we don't have anyone to lead this. Can you lead this? And we got to grow the chapter by like 500% in like 4 months. And that was
wow.
that was a kind of a springboard. I found out that I'm really good at recruiting, or at least that is a strength of mine. And so that gave me the fast track into NCPA's Student Leadership Council. And honestly, that was probably one of the best experiences, at least probably the highest ROI. And that's kind of how I found Forks, was through the Student Leadership Council as I got to preside over them my 4th year. Besides that, conferenced a lot. I think when I did the tallies, I went to 31 conferences over my 4 years. So I found, well, it's funny because I never really left Florida until I was about 21. Because, Florida, it's a vacation destination. It's really warm year round. There's really not much of a reason to leave Florida unless you want to see snow. And I heard snow was overrated. I'm like, well, I'm pretty good with Florida. But then I went to my first NCPA conference. I think that was in Charlotte, North Carolina. I was like, ooh, traveling is actually a lot of fun. You get to meet a lot of really cool people. And these are like the industry leaders that I'm like, oh, wow, these are the people that are doing all the innovative things, and they're here and they're willing to talk to me. This is awesome. Like, how can I find out more about them? And I kind of knew I wanted to own right out of school pretty much since freshman year of undergrad. And so I knew, being a very ambitious track, I wanted to meet pretty much everybody and anybody that could either connect me to an owner or just to connect and see how I can learn from them. I got to learn from a lot of different people. Yeah, you mentioned SWAT. I went to UNC, so met Joe Moose, both Mooses, Randy McDonough out in Iowa, Ken Tai out in California, a good amount of owners in Washington, and like Teresa Toll down in Florida. It was really with like CPSN Florida, and I was their intern as well. So really, like, my path was a lot of yeses. And I know there's a couple NCPA board members that were saying like, hey, within the bounds of your own time limits, say yes as much as you can, and kind of just watch the opportunities that flow to you. And you just want to be in a position to where that you can say yes to the opportunities. And so I kind of streamlined most of my life to say, all right, like, I'm single, so let's try to pour in as much into pharmacy, into this academic career as possible, so that I'm still like holding on to academics, and Rokai is the top 10% of the class. So I wanted to maintain academic excellence while still maintaining the whole like networking, so almost networking excellence in a way, to make sure that, because everybody says, the difference between networking and not working is one letter, and most people say that, hey, pharmacy is a small world. And now being in here, I'm like, wow, it's a much smaller world, and especially in independent pharmacies, like this really small, this micro small world, but that's really,
it really is.
Yes. It's honestly, every time we go to NCPA, it's like, wow, it's a little like family reunion with all the people, we're battling the PBMs and all the things on the outside. And now we get to just kind of congregate together. And so that's been awesome. And so in short, really to kind of utilizing all the resources that like Palm Beach Atlantic had, but also the resource from NCPA, CPSN allowed me to get a really good grasp of what independent pharmacy is, and really contributed to how I can eventually become an owner, where I am now.
Man, what a busy couple of years there. You mentioned NCPA, and it is such a small world. That's one of the events that when I go to, it's so like reinvigorating, and it's so warm because you're right. It's almost like a family reunion after years in the industry. Whether you're just walking from the exhibit hall to the registration desk, or you're going to stop and shake hands and hug, so many industry friends that it's so great to connect with them. So it sounds like during your time in school, you were focusing on your education, and there's so much that you have to balance, and also a pretty difficult to balance time in your life in your early 20s. I know I was a hot mess in my early 20s, so like crazy strong focus there to stay that engaged. What advice do you have to other students who are maybe not as engaged, or just focusing on the academics and saying, well, I just don't have time for this other? Like, what advice do you have on how to balance that?
Yeah, and actually, part of my academic journey was creating a course to talk about, how to be successful in pharmacy school, like the soft skills. And I'd say the one main thing is, and you always start with what's important. So your priorities, because like I had the blessing, or I guess in a way, since I was single, I was able to focus, but there was a lot of students that had families, and if they have kids, then like, hey, your priority should be your kid, your family and your kids. And yes, you're in pharmacy school, but you still want to be there for the baseball games and the moments that your kids will really remember your absence or your presence. So I usually start with what's important and where are you going? Because some people are really good with just like, hey, we just want to go in, we want to work at a chain, and that's it. And hey, if that's you, awesome. Your path, what you have to do to get there is a lot different than from maybe a residency person or even an ownership person, because you essentially have to craft from the beginning. Okay, this is kind of where I want to go. And if you have no idea, hey, set yourself up for success. And then I will say, usually, from what I've talked to, my fellow Rokai pharmacy colleagues, it's a lot of being able to manage your time. If you can master time management and self-management, kind of how you deal with stress, you can kind of beat the game that is academia. Because all I did in the very early years was spend a lot of time getting really good at getting information into me to use for an exam. And so I can take the 80 hours a week that I used to spend as a first year, by third year that became 20 hours with the same result. Kind of using Pareto's principle 80-20, 20% of your effort leads to 80% of your result. So if you can get really good at defining what structures and strategies are taking you to your grade, then you can just really dial that in. And then when you start really dialing that in of like, okay, this is what I actually need to do to excel, then you have a lot of time to do a lot of other things. I'd say like I was able to go to a lot of conferences and do a lot of things while still maintaining a good GPA was because I spent a lot of work at the very beginning saying, okay, how do I get good at school? So that now, once I'm good at school, I get to do other things. And that's what I found. And because a lot of people wonder, like, how do you have time to, be near the top of the class, but also like run 3 organizations at a time? The only way you get to do that is if you're really lean, where you kind of trim the fat and of all your operations. I also didn't I did sleep 8 hours a week, sleep 8 hours a day, and I worked out 4 times a week. I only missed about 3 weeks of that, and I think 2 of them was because I had like a flu. So when people say like, oh, you can't, maintain a healthy lifestyle but do all the things, it usually comes down to like how you're managing your time and what you're willing to give up. I was essentially, for those things, I was willing to give up pretty much everything else. Still had connections, still made friends. I wasn't like a hermit in my room, still was able to connect with a lot of people. And we did that essentially with really good systems. And usually I say that's what my success was, Jesus in a good system. And that's all I need. I'm not really that I'm not like the super IQ person that can, look at a book and memorize it. And a lot of people think that when you're near the top, they're like, oh, you just oh, you can look at the slides and you memorize it. No, I spent a lot of time getting to a point where I understood exactly what I needed to succeed in school, and then could then just kind of cut out whatever else didn't contribute to it.
Yeah. So, I mean, it sounds like you really approach that with a management mindset that I feel like a lot of students are aware of. We talk about it in different classes. You talk about that with your mentors as far as having systems in place and intentionality in business, but maybe don't apply those same kind of thought processes to their academic career where, you're just going through the educational process and I'm going to do business management later instead of applying those skills and like you said, focus on getting good at school. And I feel like that's probably just a fundamental mind shift that if you make that switch, all of a sudden you bring a new intentionality to, whatever that semester is going to look like.
Yes. It's a concept of it's called metacognition. It's the act of thinking about thinking. And because I used to, in undergrad, I studied how to study. Every summer I would spend a month just diving into research and articles so that the next year I'd come out as a better learner. And I found, and even now as I'm in practice and going into that space, recognizing that is a different, I kind of just thought oh, everybody thinks this way. But then I'm like, oh, this is actually very unique. And the ability to kind of separate yourself from the process and say, okay, looking at myself objectively, is this working? Am I evaluating hey, in business, you do any process, you evaluate it. And so recognizing hey, I can just do that in my life as I do anything. Hey, is this working? What's not working? How do we improve? And then if you're willing to do that pretty systematically, you realize how much better you get because every experience isn't wasted because now I'm learning from it.
Yeah, I kind of subscribe to the theory that you could read, 5 different management books that all are directly conflicting with each other. But if you stick to any of them, you're going to do better than not sticking to any of them because you're going to apply some kind of intentionality. And, I think that's really key is just to have that extra level of, like I said, thinking about thinking that is so easy to miss when you're stuck in the urgent and instead of the important. So let's talk about the last year in school, maybe spending some time in pharmacies. And, what did that look like? Did you find any mentors? What I think is really interesting, and in any industry, you can always find gatekeepers who are going to protect their realm or kind of put up fences, and then you're going to have facilitators that really open doors. So did you encounter both, or did you encounter great facilitators and mentors only?
Yeah, so I'd say a bit of both because when you're a student and you're saying I want to own out of school, most people look at you like you have 7 heads. And honestly, I wasn't really taken seriously up until about November of my last year. And part of that, because, most owners, when they come in and when I ask them hey, what was your path to own? It's very similar of 10 years working at a chain and then eventually mustering up enough financial capital and management experience to eventually kind of go open your own. But there were a couple key people. And I remember actually at that conference in North Carolina, Ken Tai was one of the keynote speakers, and he mentioned hey, if you want to own, you can actually do it a lot sooner than you think. And so okay, tell me how fast? 2 years, 4 years? He's hey, you can do it right out of school. He's I did a residency, and honestly, my only regret is that I just didn't do it right out. And I'm
oh wow,
I'm if there is a 1% chance that one person can do it, I'm gonna do it. And so I kind of went headstrong into that. And through that, I found a lot of really great mentors. That's kind of how I found NCPA, because I just said, who is the organization that helps with the, the small independent pharmacies? And they said like NCPA. So I'm like, all right, going to dive into that as much as I can. And then in school through CPSN in Florida as well. So Teresa Toll was a big mentor of mine, as she kind of helped groom me and prepare me I did a rotation with her as well. And so she was a really good resource. Also for my appies, I traveled a lot. It was really competitive to find the ones around you. So I was like, well, throw me as far away as I can. And there was like a rotation in Alaska that I just got booted out for. There was 3 of us and they only had 2 spots. So I'm like, well, okay, fine. I have one in California, so I'll take that one. So I actually did get to do a rotation with Ken Tai as well. And that was a really great opportunity. I think I did about 5 business plans with him over the course of 6 weeks. He really taught me how to just, look at it, because he's expanding about as fast as Jeff is in the Northwest. So I think he had at least 1 or 2 deals coming by his door a week, and then buying at least 1 to 2 a month. And so just his pace of here's a pitch, here's like, look it up, write the business plan, get really good at looking at your financials. And that helped me see, okay, this is what a pharmacy should look like, and at least one that looks successful on paper. And then you can kind of go to the store and see in practice. I will say there were, I wouldn't say a lot of barriers in terms of specific people, but more just like it's more of a barrier of concept, saying you're too young, you can't do it right out of school. You're not even very old on the age range of pharmacy students. I think the median age of pharmacy students like 28. And I came into school at like 20. So most people are like, who's this kid? Just overambitious kids trying to find out. I'm like, okay, cool. Come talk to us in a couple years when you have some experience. But I will say, honestly, the wholesalers were super supportive, like Cardinal, McKesson, and Ameris, or Cencor as they're now called. When I talked to their people in terms of their transitions teams, they were all willing to, at least near January, were at least a little more willing to work with me. I think up until about, closer to school, they were like, talk to us when it's closer, just because you're still like very, very young. But yeah, so the wholesalers were really supportive. My boss, so I worked at Atlantis Pharmacy, and so Damian Simmons, he's the owner there, and he was the one that's kind of been helping me from the very beginning, since freshman year of undergrad, and kind of, hey, this is when independent pharmacy is, and he's pretty ambitious, so he's like, hey, if you find an opportunity, jump on it, and so his support was super helpful as well. Honestly, I'd say, and my story is like there's a large, and I feel like if I had enough time, I would rattle off the 20 people that really kind of came alongside me to really help me, like Erin Dorval and Jessica Bailey Fink from my school, just the ones that kind of pushed me honestly away from residency, because as a student you are really kind of almost shoehorned into, if you are near the top, they're like your resources and your smarts would be wasted if you're not going to residency, because that is, they measure a KPI of success for a school is the residency applicants. So I understand why they try to push people into that model. But they said, like, hey, if you have they're encouraging me, like, hey, you have the management mind, and we know you're hungry for this and you always wanted this, don't settle. And so their kind of little push and they run a residency. So it was, and I know they would have loved to have me if I did. And so it was really encouraging from them to say, like, okay, like, hey, you can do this. And I know, like, UNC, so like McCary Marciniak and Laura Rhodes also kind of helping me kind of find like the clinical side of, farm community is clinical, and clinical is really just the modality of pharmacy, and that can happen in any domain, but really kind of pushing and showing me, like, hey, CPSN community is clinical. And kind of the notion in school, community versus hospital, clinical versus retail, kind of happens a lot. And I think we're doing a better job at breaking down those barriers. But there is a lot. That's still very present. And so they were really big. And CPS Center just as a whole was really big and like kind of ingraining that into me. And as I bring into my practice, I'm like, okay, how can we add these clinical elements to make sure that we are kind of showcasing, hey, how to the community around us, like, hey, we're not just putting pills in bottles. We're doing a clinical service, which is verifying the medications that we're putting in those bottles.
So it sounds like you had a lot of support, and maybe that's the key. Maybe, there's an excitement and a passion that comes with youth and the beginning of any journey. But being able to have those guiding lights and those mentors and, like the Rochai Society, the Kappa Psi, the NCPA, the pharmacy professionals, when you're leaning on such great support structures, it's easier to move forward with not just a headstrong confidence, but really with a great tool set. And it sounds like you've continued that into your next stage into ownership by partnering with the Cascadia Group. And we recently had Matt Binder on, and I didn't plan on having two pharmacists from the Cascadia Group on in a row. That's just the way it worked out. But tell me a little bit about that continued journey with leaders to matching up with Cascadia.
Yeah. No, and I actually listened to that podcast in preparation for this one. So I'm like, okay. But the Cascadia Pharmacy Group honestly been a huge blessing. And in like my last year, or in the last 4 or 5 months, really when the offers started to take off, I think at the end I got about 7 offers for ownership by April. And so it really drew me really away from Florida, and like 5 of them were in Florida and 2 were in Washington State. And what, drew me away from Florida and into the Cascadia Group was just the tribe of mentors. Because as much as it's awesome to be an owner on an island, and of course, like NCPA does provide that support. And honestly, if you're not in a group, that is the best means of, meeting people and just exchanging ideas. But just the sheer volume of leaders and in the community pharmacy space and just innovators in pharmacy a lot of them were found in this group. And actually Matt Binder is my direct mentor. And so he's kind of, if I have a media question, I just text or call, and he responds within like a couple hours. And so that level of mentorship, especially as a new grad, I knew that I just need wisdom, and that's just something I don't have. And and of course, ideally the old owner would provide that guidance, but I think if you can have a lot more voices, and now there's over 40 voices, and like I know Jacqueline Idy and Goldendale and like Haven, one of the managers in Seattle, and just being able to just talk with them, and like Tyler from Vashon Island, and getting to hear their experiences and kind of what's working for them. And since we're all on Pioneer, we get to kind of share resources and ideas, and they're like, hey, how are you doing this specific workflow thing? Because I've noticed in ownership, it's like 80% management, 20% being a pharmacist. And since I've been training on that 20%, and I have a little bit from the MBA, really the wisdom of the people around me is going to be the highest indicator of my success in the early days. And so just really honestly being able to soak up their wisdom and their guidance and kind of their experiences, how they've succeeded, how they failed, that was invaluable to me. And that's part of what brought me specifically here. Besides, of course, being a great pharmacy, rural pharmacies are awesome. The PBM's quite nicer when you're the only ones in 60 miles. But even apart from the finances, really their mentorship has been invaluable, especially as like if anyone's looking for a pharmacy as a new grad, I'd look for a group or at least one with multiple stores, just for that extra perspective.
Yeah, for sure. You mentioned a rural pharmacy, and you are Definitely a rural pharmacy. So, for anybody who is not familiar with Forks, Washington, which I'm guessing is probably quite a few, that is almost as far up and left as you can go. And I was looking around Google Maps for the closest pharmacy. So you're the only pharmacy, it seems, on the west side of Olympic National Park, and it looks like you can draw like a 40 or 50 mile circle around your pharmacy. And I didn't see another pharmacy.
Yeah, so we are pretty much the only one. Like, yeah, it's like 50, 60 miles. The next one is in Port Angeles, which is in about like an hour and 10 minutes away from us. So we serve a really wide population, and that's to the northeast. And then if you're going south, it's in Aberdeen, which is like a 2 to 3 hour drive. So we serve pretty much a really wide radius on the Northwest Peninsula. We serve the Makah, Quileute, and Ho tribes as well. And so we really do get a really diverse, unique practice. There's only one road in and one road out. Highway 101 out of the city. So if a landslide or a tree just fall, it is actually a big deal for us. It's funny. Like some of the locals will have chainsaws in their cars, and that's like a normal practice. So if they're ever driving and a tree falls on the road, they just pull out their chainsaw and just cut it up and move out of the way and carry on. Like, this is they do not have that in Fort Lauderdale.
Yeah, so probably a couple differences between Fort Lauderdale and Forks, Washington. I imagine it's your restaurant selection, your your recreational activities. Everything's going to be a little bit different when you go from a major populated vacation city to a one road in, one road out situation. So tell me a little bit about that personally. How have you adapted to that?
Yeah, so I think in any major change, and I've learned to love change, and it's with the perspective of, I know that I can't hold on to what was in the past, but I'm going to kind of just embrace whatever the new situation is. I call it just like new scenario. So yeah, Fort Lauderdale, hundreds, and like West Palm especially, hundreds. Like, I could go to a new restaurant every week in West Palm and not meet every restaurant in the 4 years of pharmacy school. And to a town of like 6 restaurants, of which most of the locals are like 3 are good.
Okay.
It is funny because Forks is actually a tourist town too. If you've heard the small series called Twilight, the books are there. The films were filmed in Portland, but based on the dark, rainy area that is Forks. And yeah, it was a little bit of it, and it is an adjustment, but I kind of just have to come at it with an open mind. Like in a big city, you can kind of be irrelevant, and I didn't understand that that's actually not a blessing, but it is a unique. Like, not everywhere is like that. Like, if you go to the gym, you may know 1 or 2 people, and you're like, oh, cool, I meet you. And it's kind of almost like 2 worlds collide when you meet someone from your school, like at your, like you see them in a restaurant, or you see like a professor restaurant, you're like, whoa, this is weird. Yeah.
But, whereas anywhere you go now,
yes,
you know everybody.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I am... even when I'm in my house, but when I walk out of my house, I am the pharmacy owner. And so, like, you're in a restaurant, and I can get anywhere from, how can I take this metoprolol, to, I don't like your phone IVR system, to all the things. And you just kind of like, oh, okay, like, I get it. It's just part of the deal. It is weird. So, like, I honestly measure civilization by, like, how close the nearest Walmart is, or like your big grocery chain, and it's like an hour and a half away.
Anything but the metric system, right? Yeah,
yes, exactly. And I'm like, wow. I mean, there is like a little grocery store like in Outfitters, which is awesome. I will say, a town without like a grocery store, or even without like a hospital or Like there's like one hospital, two clinics, and an urgent care, and it's great. At least we have those things. But it is like, wow, there is not much here.
But you touched on something that I think is such a romantic notion of a profession becoming the identity, and that can happen in a small town where, you are Josuah, the pharmacist, and it seems like it's almost kind of a difference in being a shoemaker or being a cobbler. It's that internalized Norman Rockwell role of, being the pharmacist, being the doctor, being the butcher, the baker in a small town is such a well-known persona that goes along with the title.
Oh yeah, and it's an honor because people really do trust you with their deepest concerns and, well, one, their health, but also just since we are the most accessible healthcare provider, the one that they don't have to really schedule an appointment to just talk to about really anything. It is a cool experience to be able to kind of serve them in that way. And that's kind of a big, like we have like 3 core values at Chinook that you mentioned, serve our patients, empower our employees, and transform pharmacy. And we really do get to really serve them because if you're living there, I'm the only full-timer at the moment. But I really get to interface with these people, and and it's really like all the benefits of independent pharmacy that they talk about in a big town. You really know your patients, you really know your people are like magnified and supercharged in rural. Because now it's not only do you see them at the pharmacy regularly, but they are the bankers and the bakers, and we need something like for example, we had some electrical issues at the beginning of the year. Like one of my technicians, or from my office manager, she was like checking in the order, and to her right, I think one of the just like a loose wire arced, and so it looked like a giant fireball. And she was like, "Oh my gosh, what's happening?" And so we're like, "Okay, like hey, like you're fine, like okay, you're good, not singed, awesome." And then we were looking around for an electrician, and we just got we referred a number, and so we called them. It's like, "Hey, I heard you're an electrician. We're the pharmacy. We had an issue." And he said, "Oh, like not my pharmacies. Like I'll be there in 10 minutes." And so just that cool, like the town really does support, and everybody understands that it'd be hard to be without this pharmacy this far away. And so the town kind of comes around and supports us as we support them. And that's been really cool to kind of see the both sides of, yes, I get interrupted in my grocery runs, which is fine. But if something ever happens and I need people, they're really willing to just drop everything and come to us, which is awesome.
Yeah, I love that. I really wish that somehow culturally we could scale that connectivity and that realization that everybody matters and plays an important role, and we're working together in this, that you find in that community. I just wish we could find a way to scale that into the biggest cities and maintain that that great personal responsibility and connection. What a world it'd be.
Oh yeah, and I think it's part because of anonymity. I think is the word. Like, because you can be truly anonymous, you can dissociate. Well, like in a rural town, you're forced to, like, whether or not you like these people or not, you have to see them every day, pretty much every week, one way or the other. And so people learn to kind of, at least in ways, and of course there's always small town politics. There's a couple really big families just because there's not a lot of people. So, there's a couple really big families that kind of like run some things. And
vampires.
Oh yes, that too. There is a small family. I think 7.5 vampires. Yes. But people are really willing to just support and usually when someone's hurting, and that's what I've heard and I've seen, when someone's hurting, it doesn't matter what line you are. They kind of this town will come and support that person. So that was really cool to see, and as a person who really wasn't looking for rural pharmacy found me. I didn't really know that this was, I just heard like, okay, you can make some extra money if you move to, the middle of Alaska or something like that. And so kind of stumbling upon this opportunity has given me a new sense of like really what community is, because you kind of see it in a big city. And I mean, like, and I go to church and you see that like community and close-knitness in church at least. But to see that on like a city scale has been really cool.
Yeah, I love that. So we've talked about your journey through school, your journey to Forks, Washington. The next big milestone that of course we were talking about on LinkedIn and our chat and everything was the conversion to Pioneer RX, so changing your pharmacy system. So that could go one of two ways. It's either you haven't had any time to get complacent, so change is just the norm. And so another change is no disruption to you because you're so used to change. Or you can say, man, slow down, wait a little while. Tell me a little bit about the process to, upgrade the pharmacy software early on.
Yeah. And I have been told in any position, because I've run a couple organizations and I'm probably considered a tornado. I come in, like, I kind of come in guns blazing and like, all right, hey, the one phrase I tell all my techs, and like I've kind of promoted a couple to lead tech, and I tell them, never do something just because it's the way we've always done it. If it's not broke, optimize it. And so how can we, and that's kind of been a constant in my life in terms of, okay, like change is the main constant. So how do we use this to get better? And so I knew, and especially since I had Pioneer experience in the past, I knew Pioneer would be awesome. Just because I knew I'm a tinkerer and I knew that we could really dial the system into exactly what we need. Of course, having the buy-in of the staff, that will always take, and we kind of warned them. They watched the videos and I said like, hey, this is going to be complete frame shift. This is like going from like stick to manual or vice versa, where it can do so many things that there's going to be a couple steps, because eventually we're going to use the other steps that it's leading us to. And so I wanted to transition Pioneer like a week after we bought it. But there's some things after we bought the store, but there were some things that we had to finish. There were some just delays on our side that kicked it out to November. Like I was ready to do like vaccine season with the Pioneer change with all things. So I'm like, at this point, we're just going to throw it all in. We'll figure it out as we go. And honestly, yeah, between a couple of weeks and and that's also the beauty of the group, where we can kind of exchange like Pioneer workflows in terms of like, okay, how do you do this process and this thing? And, hey, I'm dealing with this issue. And of course the Pioneer support, like the call line has been blessing, and honestly, very responsive. If we want to try anything, they've been super supportive to us. But yeah, so I love change. Wow. So getting to like work with the system, and honestly, I spent at least 2 or 3 days kind of tinkering with the system, saying like, okay, how can you make this better? I'm going to start on like, I've gotten to a point where like, I want to start on like tasks, and then task leads to care goals eventually. And that's kind of the winter project.
Okay. So, with change being a constant, that means it's also been a constant for your team at the pharmacy, where maybe it wasn't always a constant. So how have you been able to, get buy-in from a new team?
Yeah. So I will say, yeah, the last, probably, I think they said a year and a half, has been pretty stagnant, just because as they were trying to find essentially a person to buy the store. And yeah, definitely getting buy-in from the staff. I think I usually start with small changes and I prove that they work. And so before we switched to Pioneer, we made simple process changes. Like they used to print every e-script and back tag them. And, by law, we don't have to do that in Washington State anymore, as long as we can readily retrieve it. And so starting with those changes, those easy, like low fruit, low hanging, and I quantified it. I'm like, I can save an hour. I told them I could save an hour and a half from your workflow daily if we stop printing the e-scripts. And they're like, really? Yes. And then they're like, oh, wow, this is awesome. What else could we do? And so we started with those little changes to when I started to ask for bigger changes. I've told them, well, we just saved you 3 hours. I think in the first 3 months, I took 2.5 hours from the tech's workflow, just from simple process improvements, simple changes. And they're like, okay, now that you have more time, I want you to add this. I'm going to add this that's one, more meaningful and valuable to you, and not just, standing there just back tagging for the last hour of your day kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that that snowballed into the bigger change. So when we brought out Pioneer, they trusted me more. They knew that, it's funny because they can kind of see, I have a thinking face where they can see my wheels start to turn, and they're like, what? They're like, what changed now? And I say, okay, this is a change, this is why, and this is how it benefits you. And I always do it that way, the change, why, so they understand, and how it benefits them. So they know that, okay, he's not just changing to change, but that it's going to benefit me. And sometimes, and I've always have a very, community mindset in terms of my employees. So I tell them, I usually pitch it. I say, hey, this is the idea. Tell me how this could negatively impact you. And so sometimes from our brainstorming sessions, they come out with a better idea than I initially proposed, but still gets the same method, still gets the same idea across. And so I'm not too married to a process to say, oh, that my way is the best. I know, hey, most of my staff is older than me. Not by too much, actually. Most of my staff is in their late 20s, early 30s. But I'll say, hey, I'm not the most experienced person here. This is just a process that I see could benefit us. What do y'all think? And that's also helped with buy-in as well. They buy in more because they feel like they can speak into the change that they're making. So now when the workflow is more efficient, they feel like, oh, this is our system, not my system. And that helps with a lot of buy-in.
I love that, man. And that it takes a lot of confidence to be able to introduce a new idea, but also just to listen and go another direction when warranted, and confidence and leadership to be able to pivot like that. So when it comes to pivoting, I can't imagine you standing still for too long. So now that you found yourself out of school, settled into Forks, Washington, in a more rural area with the dust from new ownership and new software starting to settle, what are you going to do next to kick up fresh dust? Because I have a feeling it's got to be something pretty engaging.
Oh, for sure. So the store is doing relatively well with its rule rates. But so all it really did was script fill and do vaccines. And so I know there's I learned a lot through CPSN about clinical programs and collaborative practice agreements. And the unique part about Forks is that I have a quarter of my providers' cell phone numbers. If not, most of them are pretty amicable to any change, and I've pitched a couple hey, what about these? Or we can help you with some of your follow-ups and some clinic models, and they're like, sweet, build it. Just let us know when you want it. And so I'm gonna probably lean for at least the next couple years. Just a more in that true clinic space, see how we can help the community in that way, because there is an access issue in Forks. There's just not enough providers to see all of the patients that are in Forks, and so we're going to kind of help with that access. So I will probably stay put and optimize for a little while. I do know I do know that I want to be a multi-store owner, and so my eyes and ears are always peeled out for those, at least in the neighboring cities around me, to see like, okay, what are opportunities there are in terms of like rural pharmacies. But at least for the next 2 to 3 years, we'll be kind of building our clinical space that'll allow us to be more of like an ambulatory care site for students, as well as just, community and management. So we'll eventually have like a block rotation for students as well. We understand that it is kind of hard to get out here, so we usually comp most of our students' like expenses because it is quite the distance. The closest airport is 4 hours away, so regardless of where they fly from, it'll at least be a half-day trip.
And well, it looks like we're coming up on time, and I sure appreciate you joining us. I know you've got so much going on out there. Thanks for carving out a little bit of time. And please stay in touch. This has been great to catch up with. I wanted to kind of check in with you around 3 months after go live. So that worked out great. I can't wait to see what you're doing in another 3, 6, 12 months. I know you're going to do some great things with the support of the Cascadia Pharmacy Group behind you.
No, and thank you so much for being willing to talk to me today and having me on the podcast. It's honestly, and I know we were talking before, it's kind of a dream come true. And you're a student and you're seeing the list of all the innovators and like the Abu Bakars and like the Triple Logans and like Trixitol and all the great names and like that I've seen on the podcast as I'm like working out and like, oh wow, and this new grad's going to be on there too. Like awesome. So it's honestly an honor to be with you and all the great things that you're doing on this podcast.
The honor is mine. It's so fun to see. I get to talk to all these great leaders and to see new leadership stepping forward. It's really exciting, man. It makes it a lot of fun to come on and do these. So thanks.